Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today we're going to go over part 4 of chapter 17 from The Absorbent Mind by Maria Montessori. And this chapter is titled Further Elaboration Through Culture and Imagination. We started out talking about and exploring the laws of nature, and then we talked about imagination in the second video, which if you're curious about Montessori and how she views imagination, particularly in that 0 to 6 age group, that's a great video to go and watch. She really talks a lot about imagination in this chapter and how it fits in with the primary environment. And then in the third video, we talked about language and practical life, which are two areas of the Montessori classroom in the primary environment. And now we're going to talk about sensorial and math. And these are two other areas in the primary environment. And then after we talk about sensorial and math, we're going to move on to social groups and talk a little bit about human tendencies for community. So let's start out with sensorial. On page 163, Maria Montessori says, the senses are points of contact with the environment, and the mind, and what it takes from these, can become extremely skilled. Individual differences depend on inner tendencies productive of interest. And this is something which people come to possess in differing degree. In other words, we all have inborn attractions which cause us to grow and to develop in accordance with that nature which is ours alone. So it's really important to keep in mind that the senses are what put us into contact with our environment, right? And when we're talking about educating the senses, we're helping children become more aware of what's in their environment. We're helping them understand what their senses are telling the body. So when we're talking about educating senses, we're talking about refining the senses. So when a child is looking at different colors, yes, they might be able to tell the difference between a red, blue, yellow, those primary colors. But what about gradation? Helping them understand the different gradations of red, the different gradations of blue. That becomes the next step. And so we don't just stop at educating the primary colors with the child, but then we go into a series of gradations that they can see the differences between all the different shades from light to dark. So the more we educate the senses, the more we help children refine what senses they have, the more they're going to be able to understand their environment, the more they're going to process what's around them, make sense of it, and be able to become more skilled in using those senses. And then on page 163, Maria Montessori goes on to talk about perceptiveness. And she says, the child who has worked with our sensorial apparatus has not only acquired greater skill in the use of his hands, but has also achieved a higher degree of perceptiveness towards those stimuli which come to him from the outside world. To this extent, the outside world has become enriched for him because he is able to appreciate delicate differences, which to a less perceptive person might as well not exist. So we're talking about skills application right here. And when we have this application of skill, we can go on to do greater things. When we're talking about developing imagination, we're not talking about escaping the world that we live in, at least not in Montessori. In Montessori, we're talking about refining the senses, creating those building blocks so that the child isn't stuck in fantasy play, but has skill and application to not only think up incredible things, but do something about it. So skills application is a really important concept of the Montessori environment, and the sensorial area really helps us with that skill application. What good is it to be creative and to be imaginative if you don't have any skills to do anything about what you're thinking about? So Montessori is a huge proponent of skills-based education, and it doesn't start in high school. It starts in the 0 to 6 environment. She also talks a lot about observation on page 163. Our sensorial material provides a kind of guide to observation, for it classifies the impressions that each sense can receive, the colors, notes, noises, forms, and sizes, touch sensations, odors, and tastes. This undoubtedly is also a form of culture, for it leads us to pay attention both to ourselves and to our surroundings. No less than speech and writing, it is one of the forms of culture, which bring perfection to the personality and enrich its natural powers. She says the senses, being explorers of the world, open the way to knowledge. Our apparatus for educating the senses offers the child a key to guide his explorations of the world. They cast a light upon it which makes visible to him more things in greater detail than he could see in the dark or uneducated state. On page 164, she talks about sensorial area and sensorial qualities. And she says the number of different objects in the world is infinite, while the qualities they possess are limited. These qualities are therefore like the letters of the alphabet, which can make up an indefinite number of words. If we present the children with objects exhibiting each of these qualities separately, this is like giving them an alphabet for their exploration, a key to the door of knowledge. Anyone who has beheld not only the qualities of things classified in an orderly way, but also the gradations of each, is able to read everything that the environment and the world of nature contains. She goes on to say any object presented, any idea given, any invitation to observe is greeted with interest because the child is already sensitive to such tiny differences. It matters much more to have a prepared mind than to have a good teacher. Now, in the apparatus we have devised, there is a classification of the qualities of things, and from this the child derives one of the most effective helps to the ordering of his mind. It is natural to distinguish between things and their qualities. Everyone sees differences between colors, notes, shapes, etc. without any special education. Of its nature, the mind not only has the power to imagine, but it can also assemble and rearrange its mental content, extract an alphabet of qualities from all those numberless things that we meet in the outside world. So when we're talking about the sensorial area, we're really talking about a specialization, a sensitivity. Montessori believed there are 4 sensitive periods for the 0 to 6 environment. And refinement of the senses is one of those sensitive periods. The child that's in the 3 to 6-year-old environment has a sensitive period for refining his senses. This is something that comes very natural to them. This is something they're interested in. And so we need to take advantage of that and be able to give them these classifications, these gradations, these qualities, and educate those senses in that time frame. Because what happens with these sensitive periods is that after a certain age, they disappear. Now let's switch over to math and talk a little bit about the math area. Now on page 165, Maria Montessori talks about the mathematical mind. She says these 2 powers of the mind, referring to imagination and abstraction, which go beyond the simple perception of things actually present, play a mutual part in the construction of the mind's content. In our work, we have given a name to this part of the mind, which is built up with exactitude, and we call it the mathematical mind. I take the term from Pascal, the French philosopher, physicist, and mathematician, who said that man's mind was mathematical by nature, and that knowledge and progress came from accurate observation. And that exactitude is natural. Maria Montessori says this is a human tendency. The mathematical mind is a human tendency. She believes it is part of our nature. However, it is part of our nature that could possibly lay dormant if we're not in contact with opportunities to build the mathematical mind. So it's there, but it doesn't get activated until we begin using it, until we come into contact with mathematical opportunities. And accurate observations of what's around us, that exactitude, is part of that mathematical mind, which is built into every single person as a tendency. On page 166, she talks about math, order, and precision. She says, in our tiny children, the evidence of a mathematical bent shows itself in many striking and spontaneous ways. In fact, we showed them exactly how to do something. This precision itself seemed to hold their interest, to have a real purpose to which the action was directed. This was the first condition. But the exact way of doing it acted like a support, which rendered the child stable in his efforts, and therefore brought him to make progress in his development. Order and precision, we found, were the keys to spontaneous work in the school. Now, in this particular context, she's most likely referring to the 3 to 6-year-old age group who really love that exactitude of seeing how something is done. And that's not to say it can't be found in older children. However, The 3 to 6-year-old age group has a sensitive period for order. They have this sensitive period that's just like the sensitive period for refining the senses. This sensitive period for order really shows up in the exactitude of the lessons, showing them exactly how to do something. And this really reflects the mathematical mind. So the more exact we are in showing them a lesson in that 3 to 6-year-old environment, the more satisfying and the more interesting it is for the children. And so if you have children in your environment that are in that 3 to 4-year-old age group, being very slow, precise, and exact with your movements when it comes to showing them something is going to be very important, and they're going to pay attention to that. They want to be exact. They want to have order. And this is all part of that mathematical mind. And then Maria Montessori goes on to talk about how math fits in with the absorbent mind. And she said, the results we obtain with our little ones contrast oddly with the fact that mathematics is so often held to be a scourge rather than a pleasure in school programs. Most people have developed mental barriers against it, yet all is easy if only its roots can be implanted in the absorbent mind. So what she's talking about here is that in the environment that I work in that 3 to 6-year-old environment, the materials that we use to develop the mathematical mind are very, very concrete. And that's why when we're talking about doing the different operations with the golden beads with 4-year-olds, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with 4-year-olds, the reason why it works, it's because we make it so concrete. We make it so easy because they can see it, they can feel it. It's that sensorial experience of math. They're not just seeing a symbol. They're not just seeing a big symbol, but they're seeing the quantity that goes with it. They're manipulating the quantity. And when they can do that, they can do all of the operations. And when we do that at this age, when we start at this 4-year-old age group with these types of lessons, we're laying down this pathway in the brain. We are laying down this neural network of mathematics. And even though it is concrete now, it continually builds to a more abstract experience until finally they have no materials at all and they can do everything in their head. But again, it starts out concrete. They can put their hands on it. They can come into contact with math. They're connecting with mathematics in a very concrete way. And that's why it works. On page 167, Maria Montessori says that articles of mathematical precision do not occur in the little child's ordinary environment. Nature provides him with trees, flowers, animals, but not with these. Hence, the child's mathematical tendencies may suffer from a lack of opportunity, with detriment to his later progress. Therefore, we think of our sensorial materials as a system of materialized abstractions, or of basic mathematics. She says that the mathematical mind is active from the first, becomes apparent not only from the attraction that exactitude exerts on every action the child performs, but we see it also in the fact that the little child's need for order is one of the most powerful incentives to dominate his early life. A sensitiveness to the orderly arrangement of things, to their relative positions, is contemporaneous with simple perception, that is, with the first taking in of impressions from the environment. Also, the child can only sustain them if there is an exact procedure to be followed, and in no other way can he arrive at concentration and constancy in his work. So again, we're going to talk about this idea of order. Have you ever noticed if something's out of order in the 0 to 6-year-old's life, particularly at the younger ages of that spectrum, they go crazy. Sometimes they can't handle it. When something is changed, when something is different, if you do something differently than you've normally been doing, they may have a meltdown. And you might see that a lot at the toddler age, where they have it in their mind exactly how something is done, and if you change it, they will not like it. As they get older, we use this idea of order in the mathematical area. You need to have that exact procedure to be followed. It needs to be simple, it needs to be exact, and it needs to be consistent, and that will get their attention. That's what's going to bring them back. That's what's going to get them to repeat the exercise over and over again. If they're not doing that, either your lesson isn't exact enough, it's not simple enough for the child, you're not starting with something simple and building from it, or they might not be ready yet for that lesson. So that's it. That's all I have for part 4 today. I hope you've enjoyed this overview of sensorial and math and how it fits into culture and imagination in chapter 17. Once again, there are going to be 5 parts to chapter 17. So we've done the first 4, and the next video is going to touch on social groups and really talk about that human tendency for community. If you like what I'm doing here, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.